So the goal of our gathering today, again, is to share insights. I have a wonderful panel. We're going to build community together and hopefully just all feel prepared for that first day. We know as social workers, we are hailing from all different parts of the country in this meeting, which is very beautiful. But every district runs its school social work very differently. Every state does, every city does. So please keep that in mind as we are sharing our insights from all over. That's the little disclaimer that we all have different capacities and roles. So always check in with your district first or your supervisor. And it's harder when we have the staff or maybe even a supervisor that is not aware of what we're doing or our own methods. And so I'm going to segue now into Jasmine.
I am currently the director of mental health for 24 schools in Los Angeles, K through 8. So firstly, as you're coming into your role, it really is all about advocacy. And you may feel, I'm new, I don't want to ruffle feathers. You don't want to get into a rhythm and you're bringing something up in November. So you're likely going to have a touch point beginning of the year meeting with this person, whomever it is. And so really advocating for, a weekly or biweekly check-in is really important. I find that a lot of school leaders are very busy and they might feel intimidated managing you too, because they're like, I don't know how to manage this person. So just having that on the calendar so that you're going to have that time with them. Advocating for supervision. A lot of schools don't have budget for it, but squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so if you don't ask, you don't know what the answer is. And they may not even know that you need supervision, right? So they do have budgets. They might be able to say, I can give you a certain amount of money towards it for reimbursement. Who knows? I'll take anything, right? So ask. And maybe if they can't do it this year, maybe they can do it next year because they start planning their budgets usually in like February. So get ahead of that. And explain why you need it. So advocate also for a performance evaluation. I find a lot of social workers outside of in schools, teachers will get evaluated and you don't get anything. You're like, what goals am I working on? How do I know if I'm doing well at this job? So even if it's not a formal evaluation, like setting time on the calendar before winter break to just reflect on, how have things been going? Have I met your expectations? Here's the things that I need, et cetera. So alignment is also a key piece. So, what are the school's priorities and goals? How does my role align with that or maybe conflict with that? A good question to ask your managers, what are your hopes for me? Or what do you hope I will accomplish within the first 3 months? Because then you can come up with goals and priorities of things like, okay, I know these are things I have to do, but these are things my manager wants me to do. How can I work those in? I think another important piece is understanding your role and the ethical dilemmas that might come up within your role in a school. So being sure to review the roles and responsibilities that were in the job description, because they might be very different than what you're asked to do on that first day of school. Identify areas that might go against your code of ethics and get ahead of that. So for instance, being in charge of any, detention or discipline, it's not great for relationships, obviously. And then, or getting trained in physical management or restraint, like NCI. Our teachers often are trained in that. We should not be putting hands on our students, right? How are they going to trust us? And setting your boundaries. So, these are things I can share about the students that I work with, right? My caseload, the goals, any safety concerns, but I cannot share the content of the session. So let them know ahead of time. And then lastly, when you're thinking about your weekly and biweekly meetings, I have agenda templates for my principals and school social workers. So checking in and talking about your self-care. How have things been going? Providing student updates, minding confidentiality, right? Consent forms you're sent out, parent communication, McKinney-Vento, so are students experiencing homelessness, those types of things. Following up on crisis, so suicide risk assessments you might have done, or DCFS, CPS reports. Talking about tier 1 interventions you're going to do. Like I'm going to do a campaign for suicide prevention because that's September and that's coming up, right? Or anti-bullying in October. Tier 2, like any groups, that you can be creating and how you're going to schedule those. Any data you can share. I say academic folks really speak data. That's a lot of our stuff is not quantifiable. So being able to share, I did this many risk assessments this month or over the last quarter, or I had this many student walk-ins. They understand that, and that is helpful. And then any other updates that you have, partnerships, community events, upcoming meetings, time off. So those meetings can be about 30 minutes. If you have a great principal who's like really into it, an hour would be great because it's a lot of information to cover. And just making sure that you are expressing your needs, because I always say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So you got to squeak, squeak.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for that kind of help in that area, because I know it is something that does come up a lot for us. You mentioned self-care in there, and who's coming next, our self-care guru. I'm always following Jocelyn.
It's our individual and our group sessions, but it should also encompass times that we're going to call parents back who've left us a voicemail, check our emails, follow up with teachers, maybe have some teacher consultation. Maybe if we have pre-scheduled meetings such as IEP meetings or 504 meetings, having that in our schedule, and especially having our lunchtime in our schedule. And I'm going to go back to the lunchtime, but making sure that's in there. So it's really easy to create a schedule, but making sure you're holding yourself accountable and actually following the schedule. And once you're following your schedule, especially with your students, they know when their sessions are, they know when their groups are. Linda spoke to that. Once you're really consistent with it, it makes things flow a lot easier. Another way to have boundaries is setting up systems. So I remember when I first started as a school social worker, I didn't have a lot of systems in place. And there would be a lot of different referrals coming at me from all different places. So I'd be walking down the hallway, a teacher would stop me and say, "Hey, Miss Saylor, I have this student, I want you to talk to them. Do you think you could pull them out of class?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll get back to you." So I'll go back to my office, I'll write it on a Post-it note. Maybe I'll get a phone call from an admin, an administrator that says, "Oh, little Johnny, something's going on with him at home. Maybe you could follow up with him." So I'm writing that down on a sticky note, but I have no real system of how a referral can come to me. And I know Edith spoke to a referral system. So what worked best for me was having a Google form that was accessible for all of the teachers and the administrators. So I had one specific place where the referrals were coming. I can kind of check them off as I know I'm reaching out to those different students and parents to service them. So having that system in place was also really helpful, as well as having a sign, just a sign on your door that can indicate what you're doing at that time. So maybe you have an option for, Miss Saylor's in a session, she's in a meeting, she's in a classroom. So if people come to your door, they can see either, okay, she's busy with a student, or maybe she's in a classroom. So you're not getting a lot of interruptions during your sessions. So that's one way to exercise a boundary, by having kind of signage on your door, which indicates where you are at a certain point in time. So that would be my first, is your professional self-care with your systems and setting those boundaries. The second is going to be your emotional self-care. So we're going to talk about self-regulating. I know that as a school social worker, there have been many times and many days I felt extremely overstimulated by the knocks on the door, by the phone calls, by the email dings going off, hearing students crying in the hallway, just a lot going on. So one way that I would self-regulate, and this is really just something I've started a few years ago, would be to walk the school. So generally I work in a school that has several different floors. The most recent school I worked in has 4 floors. So I would walk all the way to the top, and I would literally walk the entire floor, then walk down to the 3rd, and so on and so forth. And it's also another way to be really visible in the school community. When people see you out and about, walking around, you're saying hi to kids, you're saying hi to staff, but it also helps me self-regulate, get out of my office, get my blood flowing, and then, kind of get back into my groove once I come back to my office. Another way that I self-regulate is I love my Apple Watch. I have, everyone who has an Apple Watch has that Breathe app, where it has like a little mandala, and when you're breathing in, it gets bigger, and when you're breathing out, it gets smaller. And it kind of has like this sensation on the watch as well. So doing that throughout the day, and sometimes even doing it with students, self-regulating with the students as well, has also been extremely, extremely helpful for me. So walking the building, doing the Breathe app has really helped me self-regulate during the day, because we're super busy as school social workers. My third tip, which is a very, very important one, is to take your lunch break. I know I've been guilty of not taking my lunch break, of working at my computer or eating during lunch brunch with the kids, but it's so super important to take that time out of your day, that 30 minutes, which is in probably everybody's contract, that you have that 30-minute lunch break. I really encourage you to step outside of your office if you can, maybe go to the teacher's lounge. If you have like an outdoor area where you can sit and eat, even if you like eating in your car, if you have time to kind of run out and just get out of the building for a moment and take that time for yourself and nourish your body. You get extra points if it's super healthy, like a salad or something, nourishing that's not going to make you all tired when you come back into the office. But taking your lunch break, building that into your schedule, and holding yourself accountable to take the lunch break. One other additional tip I would say is having an accountability partner. I got very close with the school counselor. Her office was right next to mine. And sometimes we would take our lunch together. Like, all right, let's take a break. Let's go in the conference room and just unplug from our computers and have our lunch break together. So you have somebody kind of holding you accountable. Hey, did you take your break today? Are you drinking your water today? And it also helps build community. So my 3 practical self-care tips are setting strong boundaries and having systems, self-regulating during the day, and taking your lunch break.
Thank you so much for reminding us about that. It is so, so crucial. All those tips are wonderful. And, it's just, you're right. Amazing, Jocelyn. I'm reading some of the comments here. I am now going to pin our next panelist, Lillian, who is going to jump into those home visits and attendance, because that is something that school social workers have on their plate, me included. Here is Lillian.
I am actually under MTSS, Student Support Centers. So I serve 2 6th to 8th grade middle schools. So I will start with home visits first. I think it's important in part of building that rapport with our families is to actually schedule these. Call them, text them, shoot them an email of, hey, I'm hoping to come by. Your student hasn't been to school in a week. Is everything okay? Or maybe the student's just being resistant and they just need to build that connection with an adult at the school. So you would just schedule that home visit with the family, and they're overall pretty welcoming. Some might prefer a porch visit. Some families might welcome you inside, start offering you food. So keep that cultural component in mind. It can be offensive if we do not accept the food. My next tip with that would be to have your address ready. There have been a couple times where I go to the car and then I'm like, oh my God, I didn't write down the address. I can't access the school system on my phone. So then I have to drive back near the school to get their Wi-Fi and whip out my laptop. And it just takes up time. So have your things ready and make sure to email the site you're doing the home visit for that you're going. 1, for safety, and 2, again, just that accountability and them knowing okay, they're not on campus. Where are they? Did they just dip out? Did they take a lunch break? It's no, we're doing a home visit. I'll email you. I'll follow up on how the home visit went, that I'm safe. So yeah, just keep that one in mind. Whether it's your director, your manager, the admin, just let somebody know. If possible, take a buddy. It doesn't have to be another school social worker. It could be a counselor. It could be a school community worker, just depending on what resources your district and your school have when it comes to doing those home visits. You can always come with items for the family, whether it's resources, forms that need to be signed, a thing of goodies like fidgets for the student. My attendance tips would be to work with your clerk to come up with a plan, to have incentive ideas ready when it comes to setting goals with the student. Use a Google Voice number. You're going to have to do a lot of attendance calls and communication with that. Have a Google Voice number if your district doesn't already give you a phone.
And those are great ways to get started. A lot of good safety protocol too around home visits. I know lots of people are intimidated by that, especially if you haven't done them very much. Some interns don't have the opportunity, especially with the pandemic, to be doing home visits. So it's kind of like a whole new experience. And so our next panelist is Jessica.
And like Lauren mentioned, I am a mental health counselor, so I only do counseling. So my role differs very much from the school social worker at my high school. And so how I explain that to students and to parents is that